Stand by audio.
While you were sleeping.
I'll tell you the story about the aliens later. In 3, audio in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Dr. D, listeners, welcome to the Jeremiah Show. Dr. D, have you had any strange dreams lately while you were sleeping? Of maybe
I
our
have
special guest today, Brian
I have,
Gibbs.
yes. Circuitry, you know.
Does he look familiar? Has he been in any of your recent
I
dreams?
think so. He looks kind of like me. He kind of resembles me a little bit.
No,
yeah,
he's got
exactly.
hair.
Well, he does have hair on top. That's right. Yes.
There's a little bit of a difference. Slight. His console looks bigger than yours, though.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about
it. We got, this is going to be a console off, a sound off. Okay, so Dr. D, you know when you go to the movie theaters, and you go to a 3D like a 3D film at the IMAX theater,
okay,
and you're handed that pair of glasses, the 3D glasses,
okay,
the red and the blue, I think they are,
red and blue
lenses. Well, today on the show, we are handing out a free pair of Apple AirPods Max. Those are the nice headphones. We're handing those out to all the listeners. The only stipulation is you got to get here in the next 30 seconds to the radio station, but they're free. We're going to hand them out.
That's
30
right.
seconds. I'm going to count down now. So your 30 seconds starts now.
Yeah.
If you can't make it though, in 30 seconds,
the warehouse will be emptied.
Yeah. I'm sorry. We really wanted you to have that pair of Apple AirPods Max.
Yeah.
Everything must go south.
Yeah.
That's right. Call me Crazy Eddie.
We want you to have headphones on for this one. So
you do.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in the car, I think Brian has mastered the sound that you will hear so that it even sounds good in your car. But
Brian who?
Brian Gibbs, our special guest today, the guy that has given you nightmares sometimes, and now console envy.
That's right. Yeah.
You will never forget him, Dr. D.
Well, he's like the aliens that take you away and probe you. You know, you have no control, you have no power. It's just what
I didn't know it was that.
So I just accept it.
I didn't know it was that kind of dream. But
well,
all right, let's
moving right along.
So get your headphones out. What I'm trying to tell you is get your headphones out. We're going to give you ample warning. Okay, 30 seconds is up. Thank you to all the people that showed up for the AirPods Max. I hope you enjoyed those. Put them on.
And the rest are going back to Bose.
Why you might wonder why? Yeah. Why do you need headphones? Why is it so important for this show, Dr. D?
Why?
You're asking yourself, I'm
why?
sure. Okay, I'll tell you. Because we are taking you on a sound journey like you've never experienced on radio before, with record producer, mixing engineer, and immersive mixing engineer, Brian. He goes by BT Gibbs. Okay.
All right.
Time to get those headphones on. We're waiting.
We're waiting. Yep.
Yeah, everybody have them on now.
Mm-hmm.
Are they comfortable? Are they plugged in? Turn up your sound to the appropriate level.
Yeah,
it's my pleasure to introduce you. Yeah, don't blow off your hair, Dr.
That's
D.
right.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to Brian, as I said, BT Gibbs. He is co-owner and principal at Skyline Entertainment and Publishing Toolshed Studios in Silicon Valley.
Oh, I like that. Toolshed.
This man works tirelessly. I don't think, I don't want to embarrass him, but maybe I will a little bit. I don't think I've had a guest that is more on it, more prepared. He just, when I needed information, it came to me, and it's a big subject we're talking about today, but Brian can break it all down and make you understand, and really more than that, just listen. You're going to hear it all in the engineering and the sound mixing, what he has dedicated his life to, working again tirelessly at the sound console. And if you're on YouTube, check it out. You can see his sound console, and it is beautiful. And he works tirelessly in his recording studio as a record producer, as I said, a mixing engineer, and an immersive mixing engineer. We're going to find out what that's all about on this show. Brian produced an incredible 30 plus record credits alone in 2020. After getting his Bachelor of Music degree from Berklee College of Music in jazz composition, Brian got right to work on many records for Bay Area artists, including Los Tigres del Norte's Realidades, which was a 2015 Grammy Award, which won, excuse me, a 2015 Grammy Award for the Best Regional Mexican Album, including Tejano, and to jazz artist Christopher Maine, country star music artist Alison Turner, and most recently to alternative music artist Hana Bryanne. Bryanne is also a 10-plus year Recording Academy voting member on the Board of Governors for the San Francisco chapter, serving as a chair for the San Francisco chapter Producers and Engineers Wing. And he's in action for advocacy on behalf of creators relentlessly. And Bryanne is also a 3-year district advocacy captain. In addition to presenting a multiple, excuse me, let me do that again. I swear these glasses, I'm going to throw them out. I can't read anything. Can you start me over there? Okay.
3, 2, 1.
In addition to presenting at multiple AES conferences on immersive mixing techniques, he has also presented multiple times at the Music Expo, San Francisco and Boston, Berklee College of Music, Cal State University campuses, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Webster University, and other audio engineering educational institutions. He is, and I mention all of this in his credits because Bryanne BT Gibbs, he is our expert this hour to talk about submersive audio. He knows it well, and there's no one to talk about it that could talk about it or to it better than Bryanne. It makes him our leading expert in this field to discuss spatial audio. Welcome to the show, Bryanne.
Welcome, and thank you both for having me and making me feel comfortable. Thank you very much.
You still have that radio voice.
Oh, yeah. You need to quit your day job and come work with us.
Bryanne and I talked. We talked when he was having his first cup of coffee earlier, and I'm like, "You got the great radio voice." And
because he's really.
I think you just have it, Bryanne.
He's just
I
not
tried
doing
not
it.
to talk to too many people before I dialed in.
I really think you ought to give up that other job because I don't think you're that good. I think you got to go into radio.
You might be onto something.
Well, Bryanne knew. I mean, you got a perfect radio voice for spatial audio, and that's what we're talking about. So, let's start with the basics, Bryanne. What is spatial audio?
So, spatial is really the technical, a more technical look at audio that comes from all positions, and the gaming world really leading edge on this stuff. Gamers, right? They're going to figure cool stuff out. They're going to sit on their headphones. They want to hear people running behind them and things blowing up all around them. So there are engines out there, Unreal and Wise and other platforms where people can design things and put up a brick wall on their left, a carpeted wall on their right, and you hear reflections that kind of go to your left and maybe things above you that are bouncing around. Because in the real world, we hear things in 360 degrees, but we've always listened, well, not even always, wax and wire, vinyl, eventually stereo vinyl, right? Going from mono to stereo was a big evolution. A lot of people in music industry are talking about stereo to immersive or spatial, and I'll talk about that difference being another jump forward in sound. And this immersive spatial thing, the spatial is really kind of more the technical piece of it. If you look at something like the Grammy Awards for this category, it's called immersive music. So this immersive spatial get used interchangeably. Apple just announced their launch at the very end of June, so it's only been 7 weeks that they've been streaming spatial audio. That particular format comes from Dolby, but there are other companies, Sony, Fraunhofer. YouTube uses its own type of spatial audio encoding and decoding, but this idea that you can listen from behind you, in front of you, above you, below you, is changing the way I listen to music for sure. And one of your guest hosts, Mike Gormley, interviewed Bob Margouleff back in October on your show. And I was very pleased to see that Bob was on, because he is the reason I went down this path. Was at a lunch with a bunch of audio engineers in 2016 or 17. It's been at least 4 or 5 years I've been looking into this. And he mentioned a couple of individuals that work at a company called Here 360 down in Los Angeles. Come to find out, I went to Berklee with both of the guys that started that company. I had no idea they were in this world of spatial and immersive audio. So 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, if you will. But Bob was really what got me started with
Bob
this.
is so great, isn't he?
He's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you that question just to get to know a little bit about you. And thank you so much for coming on and explaining this, and also showing us, or I guess playing for us music, giving us music that that really shows examples of the spatial audio and your work and some of the artists that you work with, Brian. But I was going to, one of the questions that I had with thinking about you and thinking about you coming on today was, we have 5 senses, right? And sound to me is probably, for me, is the most important and the one that I relate to the most. I mean, they're all very important, but when did sound become important to you? Was there a moment in your life, because you've dedicated your life to sound, basically?
Yes, it was when I had no idea what I was doing, and I got a hold of a Memorex. Is it live or is it Memorex? Right, speaking of blowing your hair off, and I didn't know. I just knew that my guitar cable was one size, and the little microphone input on my dual Memorex tape deck was another size. So I ran to this place. Back in the 1800s, there was a place called Radio Shack. No, they're still around. They're still around, and you can still get.
They had a place where you could tie up your horse out front.
That's right.
Correct. You just had to watch out for Mongo coming through. Blazing Saddles reference. So, I got an adapter. They said, "Well, this goes in there, and I can plug my cable into that," not realizing anything about stereo, mono, and impedance, low Z, high Z. I didn't know. I just knew I plugged my guitar in. It didn't sound that great, but I could take one tape and I could record a guitar part. Then I could put that tape in the other deck and like I was dubbing, and then plug my guitar back in and play over the top of it. So I was trying to figure out how to, layer, but then I was done. I was it. I can really I could keep flipping the tape and relayering and relayering, but it got muddy real fast. And then, of course, the ubiquitous Fostex 4-track recorder that everybody abused in the 80s and 90s, and then learning that, there's 4 lanes of audio on a cassette. That's why how you can flip it over. And so I can do 4 things now. But anyway, so it started when I was in my bedroom trying to play guitar terribly.
So would you say that it started more from the technical curiosity and aspect, or was it because of the music and trying to produce better sounding music with your guitar, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, it was the music, but then I quickly learned that, this is hard and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to figure out why is my guitar sound terrible? And then I learned, I needed a different cable. I needed to change the impedance. I needed to get rid of the equipment. I shouldn't be plugging my guitar into a Memorex dual tape deck, for one.
Yeah. I remember, Dr. D, when you brought up plugging in, I'm holding up, if you're watching us on YouTube, the jack for the headphones here.
Yeah.
And then they're different if you pull them out. And I remember, they got rings around them,
right.
on the
ring tip sleeve.
2 rings on this one for the smaller and one on the larger.
Right.
And I remember Dr. D explaining to me why I couldn't hear something
in both ears.
It's both ears. Yeah. And then he explained those rings. And I had never thought about the jacks and the rings around them. And I mean, what is that? Explain that to the listener, because I don't think a lot of people have ever thought about that. That's something when you plug in your iPhone or you plug in a headset to your stereo.
Yeah, Brian, why don't you take that one, Ryan?
Well, there is balanced and unbalanced, but then there's also mono and stereo. So there's a couple of different reasons to have a TRS cable or a TS cable, tip sleeve, as opposed to a tip ring sleeve. And depending on how they're soldered, one will carry the ground, one will carry the left side information, one will carry the right side information. Or if it's a balanced signal, it will sum, so it gets rid of noise. Like for instance, if you have an unbalanced cable and you run it a long way, it's going to pick up radio frequency and other interference from amps and things like that. A balanced cable can run a long way before it starts to pick up that sort of interference. So that move from mono to stereo, from a tip sleeve to, well, if we add this ring, now we can have, and we can get rid of some of the problems, right? It was solving an issue, right? We had all this interference. How can we cancel some of that out? Well, then we go from tip sleeve to tip ring sleeve.
And both of those are still a conduit to submersive audio. That is that more in the recording, the submersive or immersive audio?
Yeah, so for subversive or immersive, we have.
You said submersive. I'm thinking. Subversive. I think the Navy's submarine fleet uses.
Well, I will tell you.
I said submersive. Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm underwater, obviously, with this topic.
You know what? I love that you said that, because the big topic right now, because this is such a new thing, right? Apple. So Tidal and Kubos and Deezer have been streaming 360 audio for a while, for about 3 years. Sony RA360 is headphone only right now. It is not speaker playback. It's more about what we're doing today. The mixes that you're going to hear today were done on the Dolby platform, but they were done for binaural, so for left and right. And as you take that left and right further and further away from your ears, it starts to get swimmy and swirly. So there's a really fine kind of art, I guess, to trying to make a binaural mix actually sound okay on speakers. But the further away the left and right speaker are from you, or the more isolated, I should say, the left and right speaker are, the better for this particular format. And I know with Apple, it's the AirPods, right? The AirPod Pro, AirPod Max, and having the H1 or W1 chip in the headphone allows this decoding of what the information is. And even turning your head, there's something called head-related transfer function, without getting too nerdy, but HRTF is what like the gamers love. So in VR, right, you got the goggles on, and as you turn, the sound kind of relates to where you're looking, like it does in real life. So the reflections in the room change. If I turn and I speak that way, there's glass to the studio, it should bounce back. If I turn and speak that way, there's diffusers and absorption, and it shouldn't do that. Well, that's the idea of this kind of spatial audio and moving around. With immersive music, you don't have as much of that in the Sony platform, the Dolby platform. It's meant to just listen, but the mix engineer is allowed to do kind of whatever they want in terms of moving things around. Some for a good purpose and some to a detriment.
You know, I used Dolby back in the late 80s, early 90s. I'd never used it for its intended purpose. I was working for an AM station, and I would get a lot of materials on reel as well as cassette. And in order to clean it up, as I'm producing the program, I would put the recording so that it would record Dolby in, as I would refer to it. But when we played it back, it was played back Dolby out, which crisped it up. It brought the high end back in so that you could hear, and it didn't sound as muddy. Yes, there was a bit of tape hiss. It wasn't horrible, but again, it was an AM station. And that raises this question to you in terms of all of this spatial audio and immersive audio. How easily is it heard on this station in particular as an AM station versus an FM station versus on your player on your phone or on your computer on your player and so forth and so on, when an AM station's frequencies are very narrow? FM is much broader, but then again, take into consideration the frequencies that we can hear just as human beings out in the open air.
Excellent question. And I'll try to answer without getting too nerdy on the amplitude modulation versus the frequency modulation. But
we like nerds on this show, by the way.
That's right.
Nerds are welcome.
That's right.
AM really doesn't have any frequencies above 10K. And a lot of what, but AM does have stereo correlation. You do have a left and right. That's been pretty much a standard in AM for at least 10 years, even sometimes back to the 90s, depending on the station. But if you have separation of left and right, you can pick this up. But more importantly than the equipment, there's this thing called personalized HRTF. There are a bunch of head-related transfer function, and it has to do with how we hear. So there are a bunch of very smart people way above my pay grade who are doing all kinds of testing to see how people hear. Because how you hear a spatial audio mix or an immersive music mix and how I hear that aren't the same. And that's what we've been learning just in the last 4 to 5 years.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Dr. D.
I was going to say, I wanted to share with you when we get back from the break, something that I did not invent it. I discovered it, but only after I started doing digital audio editing in the mid 90s. But I will bring that up when we come back and then ask about your discoveries or maybe your inventions in this regard. And I'd love to talk about that when we come back.
Okay, well, let's take that break. But before we do, Brian, you've put together the music that we're going to hear on the show today. These are artists that you're working with currently and recording in this new technology, this, the spatial audio technology. You've recorded them and these songs that we're about to hear that way. Now, before we go to break, explain a little bit what the listener is going to hear so they can be aware of it, what's coming at them. I know you adjusted. Well, you go ahead and talk about what you've done.
So we took the clips, and what I did is the first 10 seconds of the clip is stereo, and then it crossfades into a binaural spatial audio mix. So if you have headphones on, you should hear a difference at about the 10-second mark as to what happens to this audio, and that's on every clip you're going to hear throughout the show today.
And will they hear it any different if they're listening right now on AM radio or on a podcast? Is there
something's going to happen in that car?
Okay. Well, let's talk about
spooky.
He's coming back to your dreams.
Come back to the dream again.
That's right. In a world where something happens in the car.
In a world.
Look in the back seat.
That's right. Don't look in the back seat.
All right. I want to mention the artist that we're about to hear. The song is Klepto. It's Hana Bryanne. And enjoy. Get those headphones on.
All right. Stand by. Let me lock this down.
So I wanted to ask the question to follow up with what you said, how everyone hears. You hear differently than I hear.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a question that has a good answer? Maybe not. How do you, as a sound engineer, do you just produce the way you normally do, or do you try to?
No, I just go with
that's every year, I guess.
Great, great mixes are great mixes. Yeah. Anything off Toto 4, anything off Gaucho, Bastille Dan. I mean, there's albums that are just.
Actually, let me ask that right when we come back.
All right.
I want to give out your recommendations for a couple.
Right. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
We're talking to Brian BT Gibbs. He's Skyline Entertainment and Publishing. He's a co-founder. He's a record producer, a mixing engineer. You can find him at skylineep.com. Our featured artists on the show today are Hana Bryanne, Alison Turner, and Christopher Main. And you just heard, coming back from the break, we went to break with Hana Bryanne's Klepto. We came back with the same song in a different version. Can you tell us what we heard there? That was spatial audio. That's an example, right, Brian?
It was. And Hana, we started working together in January of 2020. So you may remember before the zombies. And I actually just had come back from NAMM. NAMM and then the Grammys were back to back. So I was in LA for a couple of weeks. I came back up. We got to work, and then stuff happened. This whole thing you might have heard of. So anyway, we found a way to work remotely.
I've
right
been in
away.
a cave your last year and a half. What happened?
Yeah, but the acoustics were perfect in that cave.
Right. Actually, we could do Wayne's World. So
Brian, you found a way, just to get me back on track. Sorry about that. It's stupid jokes. You found a way, just like that flower in the concrete, to work together.
Persevered.
There you go.
We will find a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple of companies out there that were for a different purpose, would allow you to move really high resolution audio online. So we would talk through mobile devices, and I would be sending her this really high quality audio feed, and so she could make decisions where she was listening on what she's used to listening to. And I think a big part of this is listening to things that you're used to listening to all the time. It's like, oh, this is a new thing. I should go get something new, and then you have no reference as to what things sound like because you've never listened to it on that before. So anyway, Hana came to me, and she, much to the credit of maybe her upbringing or finding music, she loves everything from Bruce Springsteen to Joni Mitchell to Bob Dylan, and she is just getting ready to go to New York, start college, and she's very much in love with those songwriters, and then more modern artists like Phoebe Bridgers and Maggie Rogers. So she, Klepto, the two clips sound very different because it's really an A section and a B section. There's mostly just verses. There's not really a hook or a chorus. But in that genre of music, that's not uncommon now. And it's very kind of alternative, but singer-songwriter blend. So getting to the technology, it's this stereo mix. So I mix things in stereo first because that's the majority of what people are going to listen to. On her Spotify, she's over 300,000, closing in I think on 400,000 streams, and everybody's listening on stereo. So we have yet to release an immersive mix. This is kind of the first people would be hearing of it. Mm-hmm. This idea of hearing it in what I like to call windshield wiper stereo, because you can pan left and you can pan right. Well, now I can pan left to right. I can move that left to right above your head. I can move it below with Sony format. I can move it in front of you or behind you. So really, I have all these degrees of freedom, they call it, but all these degrees of arrangement that I can move things to. Mm-hmm. It applies in broadcast as well. The technology that allows broadcasters to send you live audio. You can watch, I think they tested it with the Olympics, like in South Korea and some other countries, where they're streaming MPEG-H audio, which that container allows all of these channels. 64 channels of audio going to your ears. So, yeah, at some point, it's like, well, how detailed can I get from it's right here or it's right here? And people on YouTube see me move my finger, but it's a really small, when you're talking about 64 points around a 360-degree sphere. So it's really amazing what the technology could be used for, whether it's movies, television, or gaming, which is really where a lot of this.
I was going to say the gaming, it makes a lot of sense. The films and television makes a lot of sense. How would you, in music, how does it make sense?
In music,
I mean, it's an obvious question, but how do you make it come to life like that, and why is it better?
It is, I think it's better because I like listening to music in this format. Mm-hmm. Somebody else might not, because of what we talked about earlier with people not hearing the same way, right? But I will say I am batting better than Ted Williams' average. I'm like at 1,000 on this. When I bring people to the studio, we installed a consumer playback system in Studio A. I'm pointing to the left, but through this control room glass is a beautiful 7-foot Steinway and a 9.1.4 immersive playback system that Samsung makes. $1,400. It's made for consumers, and it's something where in the 90s, if you wanted surround sound in your house, you were calling somebody up. They were running all these wires, maybe under your rug, maybe across your rug. You were tripping on them. It wasn't very pretty, and it was a pain. You had to get this receiver to work with this DVD player, and blah blah blah. Now, you need a Blu-ray player, or if you didn't even forget Blu-ray because they're streaming this sound, you just get a TV that's made in the last 2 to 3 years that has Dolby Atmos in it enabled, and a sound bar, Dolby Atmos, and you can experience this. So back to batting 1,000, I haven't had one person come and ask me, like, either what wizardry is this? What are you doing? What am I hearing? How is it I'm hearing? One of the mixes I really love, one of the first ones I found, was Higher Love Steve Winwood remix. Steve Winwood had the Higher Love remixed just as a single. It wasn't the full album, but the percussion and the reverb tails and everything is just completely around you, and it sounds like he's standing in the middle of the room.
Wow!
So it literally was HDMI cable, and then turn it on, and then go put the rear speakers where I wanted them in the rear of the room, and it was done. 15 minutes. I didn't have to call anybody. I didn't have to be an engineer to be able to hook it up to the TV. Went in, changed a couple settings in the TV, and it was working.
So everybody could do this.
You've taken all the fun out of setting up audio equipment. I want to tell you.
But you can call Geek Squad if you'd like, or a local engineer. Support your local audio engineers.
Yeah,
please,
good.
please.
And Brian, how many albums? How many recording artists? I mean, what's the back catalog look like, and how are all these studios going back and remastering their albums, and do you think this is the way it goes in the future, that everyone starts recording with this technology?
Billie Eilish just did. Yeah. So when her album came out, it's both stereo and Atmos release.
Wow.
For the most recent Billie Eilish.
Is that the future?
So I see it for those that have the budget for it, because you're talking about 2 full mixes and 2 full mastering passes, and finding the right immersive mastering engineer. I can't understate that enough, because even though I'm listening to it, having that quality check of somebody who's doing a lot of immersive mastering and can share things with you to say, this is not really what I'm hearing from in the country genre that you're working on, or in the jazz genre, I'm hearing more of this or that, and really getting down the technical path. I can't tell you how valuable working with a mastering engineer now is, because you've got multiple channels. You don't just have 2 channels of left and right, or 2.0 they call it. You've got 7.1 with the subwoofer, and then 4 overhead, so 12. It's got 12 channels of audio swimming around, or 14 with a 9.1.4 in the other room. So to get that wrangled and under control, it's really helpful to have a check.
So basically, if I have a house, I'm going to take one room, and every wall, ceiling, and floor is going to be one set of giant speakers. That's what you're telling me.
Actually, the sound bar, almost people walk right by it. They almost don't even see it. And the rear speakers are like bookshelf speakers.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Amazing.
Just incredible.
Now, we got to take a break, it looks like, again, real quick, but how do you, Jeremiah, when I go home and I turn on and I'm streaming something, do I have to look for spatial audio or Dolby Atmos, something that's recorded, or how much of our everyday, what we're watching, seeing, hearing is already recorded in this, or do you have to find it? Like, I know Apple has another section, another area where you find spatial audio recordings. Do you know how common it is already?
When you open Apple Music, it's right there, because it's only been about 7 weeks. They're really highlighting it. They want people to find it and know what it is. On Tidal, it's really easy. The streaming service also knows what device you're on, and if your device can actually handle it.
Okay.
Like, you need an iPhone X forward, or you need a Samsung Galaxy S8 forward, It knows that the app is installed on a device that it can actually handle this type of decoding.
Okay.
If it's there, then
it will do most of the work for you. And
then
most
you
of these
just
apps.
type in Dolby Atmos and all these things come up that you can listen to. On Tidal, I just go to the Dolby Atmos and I just start looking. They have all these playlists: jazz, rock, classic rock, new releases, pop.
Yeah, I have an S7, so I missed it by that much.
Foiled again.
We're listening now. Go ahead, Brian. You guys
would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling kids.
Is it all sound engineers and producers and people that mix sound? Do you all do impersonations? Because it seems like whenever somebody's on that does sound mixing.
All my impersonations are powered by propane from Strickland Propane and Propane Accessories.
Dr. D, we found your element. Whenever we have a
need to do that a little more mumbly and faster, and use this great Boomhauer.
All right. Hana Bryanne, this is Holy Ground. What anything you want to say about this before we go to break, Brian?
First single. It's done really, really well online, and no drums, which was her decision. She vetoed me on that as the producer, and I was happy to, oblige eventually. And I think it really came out great. So just acoustic guitars, bass, strings, and then layers and layers of vocals.
Here's Hana Bryanne, Holy Ground in Spatial Audio.
Okay, we're clear.
Okay, so did we do the history? I know there's some more history through.
No, we didn't. I didn't talk about Thomas Tallis. I didn't.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that? We can bring
Floyd,
that back.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. And we got to get like a short list of some albums that you want to direct people to before we go to the
okay. Let me pull up all open title and pull that up.
Yeah, a couple like top 5 or something like that.
No,
people can remember.
1 second here. I gotta check something.
Open.
Okay, so we need to hit the history. We'll do that when we come back. What else do we want to make sure we get everything? Content. What should content makers do? I think we kind of touched on that, right, Brian? Is there more? I should bring that up again?
Yeah, no, I definitely talk about that for sure.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready to go here.
What do we got? We got 14 minutes, Dr. D.
We have one more break also. Yes.
Okay.
Not that yes.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show in Spatial Audio. How'd that sound?
Pan that left or right. Pan that left or right.
Audio. I'm moving my face around the microphone. We've got Brian BT Gibbs on the show today. Let me tell you where you can find Brian. Check him out at skylineep.com. He's the man to help you do this. He's probably too busy, but he's a record producer. He's a mixing engineer. Skylineep.com at Skyline Entertainment and Publishing. He is a spatial audio king.
Now you're going to go into the history here in just a moment. So I want to touch on this real fast because I don't want to take up too much time as far as you're talking about history. I asked you earlier, I was going to ask you about the discovery of things. Now, I was working for a station. I was using cart decks, and I discovered an effect that I didn't even know existed. I didn't think I had invented it. I just figured, okay, I just don't know where to find this effect on a piece of a separate piece of equipment. And then I found it in what was called Cool Edit Pro, which is now Adobe Audition. And It was called Flange. And I created it, or I shouldn't say created, I discovered it by recording the audio on the record cart deck. Then I moved that recording over to the playback deck, put another cart in and recorded the same audio on that cart. And then I played them slightly offset. It's boom, boom, start. And it gave me that flange effect. Are there things that you have either discovered over the years that you found, oh, somebody else invented that? And okay, fine. Because I know how to make it, from the bottom up. Or that you actually have created that are now part of, say, the norm in terms of, say, this immersive audio?
I would love to say that. But I've started a trend that people can't get away from. I'm actively working on that. And to your early question about being busy, I love being busy, and I'm always looking for people that want to talk spatial, and they're looking for spatial audio mixing, of course. I would say, and for others that are listening, flange, you want a great example
I was going to ask, what is that?
Yeah. Go about 2.5 minutes into Doobie Brothers Listen to the Music, and you'll hear that crossing effect where there's this flange, and just for a brief moment, it's almost more of a phase, but and they're close. Phaser and flange are very, very closely related in terms of a modulation effect. But you'll hear the music almost disappear right when they cross, and it's a very cool effect.
Yeah. I also discovered how to turn a song with vocals into a karaoke version, and it was actually by accident that my chief engineer at the time, who was wiring up a turntable, and this was before the computers, but I remembered it, and he hooked it up, and I put the record on to test it out, and I'm going, that doesn't sound right, and then the vocal came on. I'm going, no. Why is that singer all the way in the background? I've got one of the channels out of phase.
That's right.
And that's when I was able to go into Adobe, a Cool Edit at the time, and take a stereo recording, take one channel, flip it horizontally or vertically out of phase, then mix the two together in mono, boom. Vocals went way in the background. Every frequency that was identical was pushed into the background or disappeared. And every frequency that was dissimilar was brought to the foreground. That's exactly right. It was very cool to find that. It was a lot of fun.
Lots of mistakes. Actually, the starting the studio, that was the joke for a long time. So you mentioned in my bio, I'm a jazz composition major. I went to Berklee. I did not study Berklee College of Music. I did not study production engineering. I'm very much in contact and in touch with my alma mater and the MP&E team there, and the electronic design EPD, electronic production design faculty there. But I wasn't when I was there. Forrest Wilson, who works over at Universal Audio, he started the studio with me. We both went to Berklee at the same time. And the joke for a long time was that the relationship between he and I would break stuff and he would fix it. But again, that's where we would discover things. And like,
I was going to say, that's how most things get discovered,
exactly.
Right? Where you make a mistake and you find something.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of spending some time with John Chowning, the father of FM synthesis, last Friday. I'm going to see him again tomorrow. The whole thing that led to the DX7 keyboard, and anybody can, I'm not going to say anything about the user interface. I don't think he had anything to do with the UI on that keyboard, but the sound technology was all an accident.
Yeah, tell him we said hi.
Well, what is the history? You've mentioned a couple big names that have added to spatial audio and just audio in general, and what you do, Brian. But tell us a little bit about the history.
So, spatial audio really has been around for centuries, but not in an electronic sense. So this idea of being, or maybe I should say immersive music, right? Mm-hmm. Because spatial audio is really more the technology of it. Being immersed in performance or music, you think about concert halls in Europe in the 1500s, 1400s, or even Gregorian chant back in those stone walls. That applies today because most people don't have a nice tuned living room. They don't have treatments like you see behind me in their living room. So actually the sound bouncing around plays to this effect, this spatial audio technology. But singing these Gregorian chants in stone halls, then moving forward, Thomas Tallis created a Spem and Allium, created a choral piece that is in 5 parts, but he did it in groups of 8, and he would take the groups of 8 singers and move them up into the balconies in the rear of the hall, and when they would perform it, the choir was all around you.
Wow.
So this is not really a new thing. The fact that we can deliver it on headphones, that is fairly new in the last 6 years. But the idea of being immersed in the music is not. The other one in terms of live and modern music would be Pink Floyd at Queen Elizabeth Hall in '67. They performed in quad. They had speakers behind the audience, and sound was flying all over the place. My first experience was a Yes concert. They were touring on the Talk album in '94, and that I walked in and from concession, and they were already playing, which I was bummed about. But Trevor Rabin's guitar was flying all over the place, and I was, what is going on? Because they had put speakers behind the audience, and they were delivering it in quad. SACD and that it was a and DVDA was a thing at that time. But so yeah, it was.
You mentioned the Pink Floyd. Now that I think about this, real quick story. We were building Fleetwood's on Front Street, Mick Fleetwood's restaurant over in Maui. And I flew over with the liquor company, Warren Shawn. He brought us over to Honolulu for a night. He picks us up in his brand new Range Rover. He's all proud of it with all these speakers all around. And he turns up so loud that my ears are bleeding, but I loved it. I loved every second of it. And he played, I forget the song. Is it The Wall with the chimes and the clock going off? And
that's Time off of
Time. And it just goes around and around you. And I was this was probably my first real experience with spatial audio, I guess, and didn't know it at the time, but it was everywhere. And it almost tripped you out a little bit because, the sounds are just all around you and different areas. What would be some of the top 5, maybe the top 5 or top 3 albums that you would recommend steer people towards, Brian, to hear this?
He's local in Oakland, and he worked with engineers that I know and have a lot of respect for, but fantastic Negrito.
Oh yeah, we've had him on. He's great.
Yeah, 3 albums, 3 Grammys. I mean, just coming from having left the music industry and then just literally crushing it in contemporary blues. But he released his last album in Dolby Atmos, full album release, not just single, and it's just awesome. I can sit and listen, and it's wonderful. You were mentioning earlier about back catalog and things being remixed. There's a lot of singles out there. So I'm a big nerd when it comes to music. Pink Floyd, yes, you heard that already. Rush, I love Rush. And there's 5.1 mixes, 7.1 mixes. And there's a couple of Dolby Atmos mixes, Tom Sawyer and Limelight, and I do love to listen to those, but not full album remixes yet. And I think your question about the publishing companies and the record labels and what they're going to do, it's a really good question because of the expense, right? What is really the right return on investment? If you go back and remix this, is it really a thing? Is it going to warrant enough, revenue to justify going back and remixing? What's our pain point in terms of the immersive remixer and the
So this is your advice for the artists and possibly producers?
My advice is to think about it before. Listen to the room. Buy a immersive or spatial audio microphone. There are some tetrahedral, there's a term for you, but basically it's similar to a Blumline, which is an older kind of 2 mid-side mics forming an X. But get a mic that can tell you what was happening off the ceiling and put it in the middle of the room while the band is recording. A lot of times, right now, a lot of people recording separately, maybe just for the drummer, maybe just in the drum room, put a ambisonic mic in the room that people can hear the tops, the bottoms, the sides, and then the mix engineer, give it to the mix engineer and let them hear what was happening in the room and go, oh, well, I can make a reverb that sounds like that. Let me kind of mix the guitars to sound like they were in the same room and the vocal like it was in the same room and try to start to create this space. So if there are artists listening, producers, engineers, think about it before in pre-production while you're still arranging and the songs are written. Wonderful. Now let's get to the point of thinking, how can we really immerse our listeners as opposed to just windshield wiper left and right stereo?
How about consumers? What should we do?
Consumers
save your money to be able to buy this expensive stuff.
Yes. So write your letter to Santa now.
Yes, there you go.
It's August, but he takes them year round, and so $199, you can get a device that will play back, a speaker that will play back Dolby Atmos. You also can get, just off screen here, but I have a tablet that I got. It was the Amazon truck, deal of the day, $179 from Samsung. It plays Dolby Atmos. But it's a tablet, so there's pretty much nothing under 250 hertz. There's no low end with it. But this idea that like Amazon sells the Echo Studio with a subwoofer, you can get a Bluetooth subwoofer paired with it, and you can have Dolby Atmos playback. Now, you have to be a subscriber to Amazon to play it through their device, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I see this happening with the 4K TV, Apple 4K TV. Same thing. You can play it through that. You can get a Google Chromecast and plug it into your TV. That will work. But you've got to have a device that can decode it. So your TV has to be probably 2019 or forward.
Okay. Well, Brian, we're close to the end of the show here. This has been really fascinating, and I got a great education. But you can hear it all in the music. It's just enjoy it, what we've been playing, and look for stuff on Spatial Audio. If you need help as an artist, I'm sure, Brian, you're for hire. Yes. Up at Skyline.
I'm happy to talk about
Happy to help you. Happy to talk to you. Dr. D, and you can do some voice impressions off air here after we're finished and talk, nerd out a little bit more. But I wanted to leave with this, Brian, that in helping to develop the next generation of creators, you regularly serve as a Grammy U mentor, as well as an alumni mentor for your alma mater, Berklee College of Music. Can you tell us a little bit about this program?
Yes. And I have a follow-up. working to develop one for the Audio Engineering Society through their Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I think getting younger artists, creators, engineers, producers to look and see, oh, that person does what I want to do, and they look like me. Mm-hmm. That I see that I could be that, right? There's a great saying of, and I'm gonna miscredit it, and her name is right at the tip of my tongue, but she started the children's fund. But anyway, it's hard to be what you can't see. Is basically the line. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we have mentorship where we're reaching out to students. I just wrapped up my summer with my Berklee College of Music graduates, and I'm going to start fall semester with Grammy U through the Recording Academy. So it's really important for me to give back. Plus, I get a pulse of what's going on right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you just answered my follow-up question about the diversity and inclusion. If someone is listening, is watching, and wants to know how they can get into and follow their dreams of a career like you have, where would you send them, Brian?
I would tell them, if you're an engineer, join the Audio Engineering Society. It's $100 a year, and go to everything that the Audio Engineering Society puts on. I'm one of the co-chairs for the convention that's going to be in October. Half of it will be in Las Vegas. Half of it was going to be online. If you're interested in music production specifically, consider becoming a member of the Recording Academy. You just need 2 recommendations, and they don't have to be Recording Academy members. They can be, but they just have to be music industry professionals, verifiable professionals that can write you a recommendation. And if you've got the credits, you could also be a 10-year plus voting member for the Grammy someday.
Be like Brian. But what's a BT, Brian? I want to know. Should I have been calling you BT this whole time, or is that only friends?
Most people that actually know me know
real close
me.
Friends.
The people that know me call me Gibbs, and so how we met and the people we met. There's another Gibbs running around. He's been on your show, so that doesn't work. And the BT was by accident. So when I first set up my mail account back in the 90s, it was just, BT and some stuff after it. Well, when I signed up for Facebook in 2009, I was late to the party. It said, what's your
Lucky
email?
You.
BT blah, blah, blah. What's your user ID? BT blah, blah, blah. Over time, people started calling me BT, and I'm like, why are you doing? Oh, you don't know me. You know me on Facebook. It's like, oh, happy birthday. I'm like, who are you? But so I've come to learn over time that but then also it served me well now as a record producer, because there are some other Bryan Gibbs that I don't necessarily, that do something very different than
it's a crowded market.
Well, there's also a notorious Bryan Gibbs in the history back in New York. You can look that up. It's on Wikipedia. But I needed to have something, right? It's like SAG-AFTRA. You got to have a unique name. And so I said, well, the BT thing is working on social media, and I'll just run with it.
So originally it was that BT was, people referred to you that didn't know you. So that was an indicator. But now, if they know you, they know it's BT, right?
Yeah,
you go by BT.
or
Gibbs.
Flipped.
Or
Gibbs. That are closest.
Skyline Entertainment and Publishing is where you can find BT or Gibbs or Bryan. He'll help you with all three names. He'll answer all three. He's a record producer, a mixing engineer. He's been our very special guest this hour. Skyline EP. He's made me smarter, Dr. D, and I like that when I finish an hour in my day.
There you go.
He's a featured artist on the show this hour. You've been listening to Spatial Audio, and Bryan has produced and sound mixed these albums, these artists. Hana Bryanne. You can find her at Hana Bryanne on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm going to spell it for you. HANA BRYANNE. She's on Bird Street Records, Copper Boom Publishing, and BMI. We've had Alison Turner music on. It's you can find her on Instagram and TikTok at Alison Turner Music. Route 152 Records, Windows Down Publishing, ASCAP, TuneCore Digital Music, Thai March Music, and BMI. I love giving all the credits out there to all the hardworking people that deserve them. Christopher Main at C. That's just the letter C, Main Music. You can find Bryan again at skylineep.com. And we're going to take you out of the show today with another example of spatial audio from Bryan Gibbs and artist Hana Bryanne. It's Klepto. We're going to play the entire song now, so you get to hear all of it. Immerse yourself in spatial audio. Bryan,
grab those headphones.
Yeah, grab those headphones. They should not have left your head.
That's right.
And Bryan, you got any final words you'd like to say to your fans, your artists? Anything you'd like to say?
Think about it early. If it fascinates you, and you're a creator, start thinking about it even in the writing process. You're writing lyrics, how can I get my audience literally immersed in this art that I'm creating? If you're a consumer, write to Santa now and see what he might be able to bring you come December. But in all seriousness, Black Friday is going to be littered with, Dolby Atmos sound bars. Okay. Because that's the prevalent delivery method for this immersive playback, whether it's movies or music or games or live streaming. So look at the sound bars come Black Friday. They're going to be everywhere from the $200 range to the, $5,000 range.
That's great. And what a great advice. If Santa doesn't work out, have a backup plan.
That's right.
So next week, let me tell you who's on the show. Denise Donatelli, the famous jazz artist. And we've also got Nathan Foy. He's CEO of Fortis. If you've flown luxury or you do anything luxury out there, or you like a really great vacation, you probably know Nathan Foy, CEO of Fortis. And our guest today again has been Bryan BT Gibbs. Bryan, don't call me BT Gibbs, or call me Bryan BT Gibbs. So thanks so much, Bryan, for being on and explaining and sharing your craft with us. We love it. I hope spatial audio comes to radio soon.
It could.
You never know.
Okay.
You never know.
You gotta help set up our studio for us, Bryan. Have a great week, everybody. Listen more, evolve.
All right, we're clear. And Bryan, don't go anywhere. I am going to have you do a little sound clip for us, a radio drop that we can use in future programs, about 10, 15, 20 seconds. basically introducing yourself, what you do, and you're listening to.
And promote whatever you want. Your thing or an artist, whatever you want.
Yeah, and you're listening to the Jeremiah Show. All right. All right. I'll give you a countdown. In 3, 2, 1.
This is Brian B.T. Gibbs, and you are listening to The Jeremiah Show. And if you are looking for anything related to music production, spatial audio, immersive music, you can find me. It's at Skyline EP, www.skylineep.com. And it's been my pleasure to talk with Dr. D and Jeremiah about this amazing technology. And again, you are listening to The Jeremiah Show.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Great, Brian.
Hey, one quick question for you. Your just very briefly, because I know you got to go and we got to go. Your thoughts on I'll call it the invention of the MP3 compression format.
It allowed us to do what we're doing today, regardless of what you think about how good it sounds or bad it sounds. I mean, the 96K format when it first came out, 128, yikes. 256, okay. 320 actually is livable. And that's pretty much what Spotify streams. So we wouldn't have streaming if it wasn't for, well, if we didn't have MP3, we wouldn't have had Napster. If we wouldn't have had Napster, we wouldn't have had lawsuits. If we didn't have lawsuits, we wouldn't have the streaming companies. If we didn't have the streaming companies, we wouldn't have the Music Modernization Act. If we didn't have the Music Modernization Act.
Yeah, I hear you.
It was a necessary item, not evil at the time.
I love that quote. I'm clipping that. I'm going to put that in a little clip.
Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful, Brian. All right, man. I hope we hit everything. You gave us so much information. Thank you for all the prep you did for us. And thank you for coming on and helping explain. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, better to have too much than not enough.
Yeah, Well, we'll be in touch soon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You
soon.
bet. Bye-bye.
Right, peace.
Bye.